Welcome back to the Urban Elements studio. Today we're going to be working with a new project for me. I'm going to be working with Wholecloth quilts. But before I get into that, I wanted to tell you a story because I feel like some of you need to hear it. I have been quilting since 1991. My original long arm machine was a handy quilter, and it was a very early one. And I had it for probably 10 years or more, and I wanted to upgrade. Mostly I wanted a larger design space, but I also wanted a little more precision tension. So I was looking for a Bernina machine when I was at Quilt Market one year, and I came across somebody that was selling one. So I purchased my long arm machine secondhand. And I also had to finance the machine. It took me over 3 years to pay the machine off. I just think it's important for people to realize that not everyone can afford to go out and purchase a brand new machine and have the cash on hand to pay for that. The same thing is true for my IntelliQuilter. I bought the IntelliQuilter secondhand, and I'm also making payments on that. And it'll probably take a couple years for me to finish paying for the IntelliQuilter. I set up the IntelliQuilter myself on the Bernina. The Bernina, I did have somebody come set up the machine, but there was a learning curve. Even though I had been long arming for many years, there was a learning curve for me to get adjusted to the Bernina. And it wasn't like a 2-week learning period. It took me maybe 6 to 9 months before I really felt comfortable with the machine. And I made adjustments to the frame after the salesperson set it up. And so even the frame was not set up the way I wanted it to my specification. It's just something you have to learn. So also with the IntelliQuilter, I installed the IntelliQuilter on my machine and frame myself. I did get a couple calls in from Zoltan from IntelliQuilter to help me get it set up, because when I first got it, I was completely at odds with the machine. I couldn't get it to do anything. So there was, and there is, a learning curve for using equipment, especially when you're looking at equipment that costs this much money and that works so precisely. So don't think that you're going to buy a machine or even a computerized machine and you're suddenly going to be right out of the gate quilting elaborate quilts. It just doesn't happen that way. It's not the machine that makes you a long armer. It's your practice. It's when you practice, that's when you become good at something. It's if a painter buys a paintbrush, he doesn't suddenly become a painter. You have to practice with the paintbrush. Just because you buy really expensive paintbrushes doesn't mean you're suddenly a really good painter. You still have to put in the practice. So having said that, I just want to say I didn't have any in-person training on the IntelliQuilter, and I'm still on my arc of learning. And one of the things that I am wanting to do is I really want to be able to do anything on the machine that I want. I don't want to just be satisfied with edge-to-edge designs when the machines are capable of doing so much more. And one of the things I've always been fascinated with are Wholecloth quilts. And I understand that there are basically 3 different ways to bring in a Wholecloth quilt and to sew them. And these are just to break it down into the simplest form, this is the 3 basic methods. The first one is where you would bring the entire Wholecloth quilt design in as a single block unit. And you would put in the size of your quilt, you would bring in that whole unit all completely assembled, and then you would stitch it out. That's probably the easiest way to do it, and that's where I'm going to be starting. The second way is to bring the Wholecloth quilt in basically in rows, and each row would be different, and you would bring those in one at a time and sew them out one at a time, and in doing so you would be bringing in the whole design. The last way, and the way that's probably the most complicated to learn in the beginning, is to bring in each of the units that make up the Wholecloth. So you might have a center medallion and then 4 squares that go around the center medallion, and then pieces of the border and corner elements and setting triangles and so forth. There's probably an endless variety of ways that a whole cloth could be constructed from designs. So this is a story arc. This is a training series that will be continuing, and I will be learning as I go, because this is something I want to learn and I want to show you. The next step that I will say that you will notice the difference is that I'm going to be starting small. The less time I have to roll up on each quilt, the fewer mistakes I feel like I can make. So the very first one is really going to be a very small top, a very small quilt, and it's going to be approximately 32 inches square or somewhere in that vicinity. That means I really have the capacity to have most of the design in 2 sections. My machine can sew 19 inches, so at 32 inches I would have enough space to only have to roll up twice. I may roll up 3 times because I may do the center and then the top and bottom, but you will see that as I proceed. Having said that, another component of me doing videos, especially doing them every single week, is that I don't always have time to make a completed top or have a completed top for every week, for every project. I do other things for myself as well as these videos, so I needed to find a way to simplify that process. I also do not like making projects that I would call throwaway project, where I'm basically just loading on white fabric or a colored fabric and quilting something out and then making dog bedding out of it. Not that dog bedding is bad, but I just don't want to keep making projects that have no real usefulness. So I started thinking about something that I could use as a top that would be still useful and decorative, and that's when I decided to start using vintage tablecloths. And there's a wide variety of these available, Facebook Marketplace, eBay, there's antique shops that carry them, and you don't have to use a vintage one, but this is just what I'm doing. And the first one that I'm doing is going to be this one. It actually looks like an old single rosebud, but it also has the leaf that looks like it could be a dogwood pattern, but it's a really pretty tablecloth. It's in fairly good shape. This one really doesn't have any stains on it, but I bought many of them in the building up to this process. This one has been very heavily used because the tag on it is almost completely worn out. And anybody that collects tablecloths will know the makers of some of these tablecloths. This one's something like Whirligig or something like that. Whirligig. It's a famous company, but I like roses. So that's why I chose this. I chose it for its size and its pattern, which is decorative in the 4 corners. And I think a whole cloth, medallion type cloth pattern will look pretty in here. So I'm sure you could probably see the blue chalk line that I've made on there. I don't even know that I'm going to need that yet as a reference point, but I put it on there from the start. And so I'm going to go ahead and get this onto the machine. I already have some white twill backing and white batting. The next step though really is for us to go in and look at the computer, because a whole cloth quilt is different in the way that we stitch it out, but it's also different in the start in the way that we download it and bring it onto our stick. Because of all the different methodology that I mentioned in loading the pattern, they have to give us all of those options when they sell us the pattern as well. So you'll see when we go to the design and you look at the file, there's going to be multiple files, a lot more files than what there normally would be for a single panto. So we're going to go to the computer and I'm going to show you what the process of downloading that looks like, renaming the files and loading them to the USB stick so we can load it onto the computer. So that's going to be our first step in the journey. We are at the home page of Urban Elements, and before I get into showing you all of the different whole cloth quilts, I wanted to show you where you could find a free one. So I'm going to select Quilting Designs here up on the banner, and the website is pulling it up. And on the left hand side we have subcategories that we can shop by. These are ways to filter out specific things that we might be looking for, and we're going to click on subcategory and go to free. You can see there are 56 free designs that you can download. Many of these now are available, well, actually all of these are available as a whole cloth, or an embroidery design. So you could do quilting with the embroidery module. And here on the second page, you'll see there is a whole cloth set, and it's called Moonflower. And if we click on this to open it, you can see you could print this out as a self-print, which would be paper, or as a digital download, and that would give you all the digital files to complete this project. If you look at the photos here, you can arrow through those, and I find this one really useful because it shows you how you would sew this out in rows. So one row would be purple, the second might be this green, the third row might be the orange, and the fourth row would be blue, and then this would just repeat on the bottom half of the quilt. The last component shows you what this would look like as components. So you have the border, the center square, the corner element for the borders, and the panto itself for the edges. So if you were bringing this in components, you would use this file format. Doing rows, it would be this one, and the last one would be this, which would bring everything in together as a block. So that is just a free one that you could test, download and practice on, and play with it before feeling like you've invested anything. But what I'm going to do is go up to the search the entire store and just put in whole cloth. And my computer's slowly moving. And what you will see is page after page of different whole cloth quilts that are available for purchase. And we could click on any different one of these just to see what information they have for this particular whole cloth. I like to go down here to the bottom here to see this. This is a 56 by 56 whole cloth. I just really like the information of knowing what size they are. But again, if you brought this in as a block unit, it would come in this way, all as one complete unit. This second method would be giving you rows, so you'd have row 1, row 2, row 3, row 4, and then you would reverse the process for the bottom half. And then the last method would be to basically assemble the design on your own with all of the base components. So I'm going to go back and show you the one that I'm actually going to be using. And I have to figure out where it's at. I think it's called Whirligig. This is the one that I'm going to be using today. It has the different components, even though it doesn't have the photos, but I'm going to be bringing this in as a block unit. You can see this is available only as a digital download, and if you had a quilt top, you could take a picture and put it on the website and use the design wall to see how this would look on there, but I'm not going to go through that step right at the moment because I don't have a photo of the rose tablecloth. So this is the one that I'm going to be working with today, and I'm going to download the file, and I'm going to start the video again when we have the file downloaded and on my computer. I have downloaded the Jessica's Whirligig Wholecloth set. You can see the file here in my downloads. So I'm going to double click on that file, and we're going to get the file to open. At this point, because these files are zipped, the only thing that you could open would be this one PDF. But I'm going to go up here to the Extract All button, and I'm going to click on that, and it's going to come up showing me where the file will be located at, and I'm going to go ahead and hit extract. If I wanted this to come up in a different place, I could type that in, but I don't want to lose it, so I'm going to leave it just as it is and hit extract. We'll see the process of this file being opened, and we're going to get a whole new window with the unzipped files. So this is the unzipped files, and this is the original file. I no longer need this. I could go ahead and delete it, or if you wanted to, you could have a separate folder on your computer that had all of your zipped files in it from your downloads. But I think better yet, I would have a folder on an external hard drive, just in case your computer crashed or got a virus. You would have all of those saved. Now at Urban Elements, as long as you purchase these items with an account that you're signed into it, Urban Elements will maintain copies of all your purchases, and you can always re-download those items. So here on the right hand side, we have all of the different files. You can see at the very end here it says block, full, set. I believe the last four are the components. So there's also a PDF here. We could go ahead and click on the PDF. I always like to save a photo of all my PDFs in a separate file. I just call it IQ PDF files. And I apologize, my computer does run a little bit slow. It actually is working. Also, I always like to rename my files at this point. This first JS771592, that's an inventory control number for Urban Elements. The JS is Jessica Schick, the designer. This is how they track purchases and how they pay royalties for all of the designs. We don't need that after it's purchased. We just need this component here. And one of the things that I like to do also is to look at the PDF and see if there's any sizing information. So this particular PDF doesn't have any size information on it, but I know from Jessica this could be anywhere from a 16-inch piece all the way up to probably 40 inches. So I could go ahead and rename that at the end. I'm just going to put 16 plus. And as soon as I hit enter, that's going to move that to a different position. All of these files are going to have additional files in them. So one way to keep track of which one I've opened already is, again, to rename it. I'm going to rename them one at a time, and then afterwards I'm going to go into the file and see what's in there. So we can see after I open the first file, I have an additional PDF in here, and because I use an IntelliQuilter, I have my IQ file. Those are the two files in this section that I'm going to be concerned with. This is the second PDF. This one has a recommended size here of 6+ inches. This is just one of the components of the design. So now that I've seen this, I'm going to go ahead and rename it. Eliminate the inventory control number, add the height, and now we can save that, and that will move that to the top of the pile. I'm going to do the same thing with the IntelliQuilter file. I'm going to rename that. One of them is just the photograph, the other is the actual digital design. So I'm going to add in there 6 inches, my -6. I want to make sure that it comes before the .iqp because that's the file format. We don't want to change that. So once I hit enter, that's going to move that to the top. And at this point, I could copy and paste each of these to where I want to take them. The block I would put directly to the USB stick, or you could send it to your files. I'm going to show you in my pictures what I do. This is my my picture file, and let's see, where's it at? There it is. This is my IQ PDF file. I put a copy of each of my design PDF files in here, and here is my IQ digital designs. And I have, these are all my digital formats. Only for the IQ, it doesn't have any other file formats in there, and it's just a file of all of the designs for that specific item. You can see here, where's W? Up here, no, here it is. I have Jessica's Whirligig Wholecloth. There's several different files because we have different file formats, you know, the blocks and so forth. So back to my downloads. This is what the zipped file looks like. This is the unzipped file. So again, I've already opened this one. I would open up this one. This is going to be the full set, and this one has 2 PDFs in it, so we would want to capture both of those, and it's going to have the IQ file here. I just like to look up and down the list to make sure that I have everything. But when we open this PDF file, you'll see that we're getting the whole unit. Open this one up and see if it's any different. This one has our components. So I would copy those to our files. I would capture my IQ file from here. This one has an additional PDF. This shows you the corner unit. So I would capture that PDF and this IQ file. And at each point I would be adding my height, which is listed here.
and I would be eliminating this inventory control number. If you do not eliminate that, when you add it to your IQ, the design is not going to be listed alphabetically. It's going to be listed numerically, and so this, while it would be called Whirligig, would be showing up under J. So it would just be harder to find. That's why I like to rename them and eliminate that file format. We're down to the last two. Here's your IQ file. Here's another PDF. This one has just a little triangle unit. And the last one is this little element. So we would capture that PDF and this IQ file, doing the same process as we have up to this point. As you can see, we are two different things happening here. One, in the upper left-hand corner, you can see I'm in demo mode because I'm not actually on my tablet. My tablet is not actually on the docking system of the Bernina. I'm actually using an IQ stick just for demo purposes. So the first thing we're going to do at our main menu is click on Design So Quilt, and we're going to start new. We have a work in progress. Do we want to replace it? Yes, we do. Do we want to permanently erase it? Yes. And we're going to reset our time. So as I mentioned earlier, we bring in this Wholecloth pattern as a block, not as a pantograph. Pantographs always ask for even and odd rows, but the block pattern brings everything in as one unit. So we're going to select block. We're going to enter the rectangle manually. You'll see the other two options aren't even highlighted because I'm not actually on my frame. So I couldn't physically mark it on the quilt or trace it on the quilt. My only option off the frame is to enter rectangle manually, which is what I would have chosen anyway. Our width is going to be 32 inches, so I'm going to go ahead and enter that. Our height is going to be 34 inches, so I will enter that, and we will hit continue. Up here on the white portion of the screen, you can see our visual representation of the project that we're going to be working on today. My size is correct, so I don't need to change that. I don't need to scale it or move it or rotate it. I can just hit finished. And I had already opened this up, but in my downloads, I have all of the portions of the Whirligig set that I went ahead and downloaded. So you can see we have the block here, the whole unit, and then we have each of the components. I'm not going to be working with any of those today, so I'm just going to select the whole block and hit continue. And you can see we have the whole design comes in as one unit. And I'm going to work on the height a little bit because the tablecloth is not exactly square. It's a little bit higher than it is wider. Almost every Wholecloth in the that I opened were squares. So I'm just stretching this. I'm going to stretch it about 2 inches, increasing the height of it until I like it, and I may decrease the width of it a little bit. I don't mind if it's a little bit farther away from the edges, just in case the tablecloth isn't exactly square. So when I get that to a place that I'm comfortable with, where I have a little bit of room from the edge, I can go ahead and hit finished. And do I want to add another block pattern? No. So the next thing I want to do, you can see all of these jump stitches in between the separate patterns, and I don't like jump stitches I would rather separate these out. Sometimes because it will sew this portion here and then come down to here, and my frame just isn't big enough to sew that. You can see here the portion I'm outlining is about how much of the design that I could stitch out at one time. So I'll probably do the center first and then the top and bottom separate. I might do the center and these two corner or two side pieces. So what I want to do is hit split pattern, and I just want to touch somewhere on the line and hit split. And this piece here looks like it sews here across the top and down to here. That's fine, but I want to split this one. So I just touch on the blue line somewhere and we'll split it off. You see here is another one. The center is connected to this edge, which would be larger than my frame could accommodate. So I'm going to hit that one, split it, and I want to get this one. I may just go ahead and eliminate all of these and just combine the pattern back at the end. But remember that these jump stitches are blue. I am splitting everywhere I see a jump stitch. And I apologize, but my mouse is not cooperating very well today. And keep in mind that I'm in demo mode. If I made any little mistakes on this as I went, they won't be transferred to the tablet because I'm not uploading this to the tablet. I could do this work on the stick and then upload it, and then I could just go ahead and upload the stick to the tablet and all this information would be saved. At this point I've separated everything out, but I don't want to stop here because now I need to combine this together as a whole unit again, even though I don't want jump stitches. So I can combine the pattern and oh, the mouse is driving me crazy. We'll select the first piece to combine. And here's where we want to make our change. I want to use, I just eliminated all the jump stitches. I want to stop and cut threads. So each of these points I'm going to have to stop and cut, but that's fine. That's what I would want to do. So I'm going to hit this one next. Stop and cut. So now I have these sections 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections combined, and I want to continue. Now I'm going to do this whole center section here. There's 2 edges and all of this in the center. At this point, I will have rolled the quilt up so that I know that I can access all of these pieces. And then I would roll the quilt up and I would do the bottom half. I'm going to stop to cut threads each time, which gives me opportunity to realign or move the quilt if I need to. I'm just combining these together in rows. Stopping to cut threads in between. And there we have the entire piece combined again. I can hit finished, finished, and we can do the first piece. And if we hit preview and start, we can actually watch how it would do the first portion of the quilt and then move on. Down here we have our speed and our details. I never adjust these. Sometimes a specific pattern might ask you to adjust something because it's very detail oriented, but I don't usually address these. But I'm not going to let this all play out because we're going to actually watch it sew out on the machine. But this preview function is really useful if you're not sure exactly what order in which something's going to sew out. This helps you eliminate any surprises. And it also is mesmerizing and also a little bit quieter than watching the machine. So I'm going to go out and repeat this process on the actual frame with the IQ program. And then we'll get started on actual sewing.
You can see I did the same thing on the actual tablet on the frame that I did inside on the IQ stick. The only thing that I did was maybe take a little bit more time in which way I was combining the pieces back. So I knew that I got all of the top half first, the center section second, and all the third on the bottom. So I'm going to roll up in 3 different positions to get all of the pieces done. The only thing I didn't do was save quilt pattern, which could be very useful if you wanted to do this again. And save, rename the quilt. I'm going to call this Whirligig modified or Whirligig changed. So I'm just going to type that in. Whirligig new. So I'll enter that and I'm just going to save it in my downloads for now, and then I can go ahead and sew quilt. I'm going to select the first pattern, which would be this one up here. I know it's going to go ahead and move to its start position, so I'll hit continue, sew quilt, and it's going to go up and start in its first position. I am just going to move the machine down to make sure that we have clearance for the first section, just to make sure that it can sew out everything in that top section. So I can go back to the start position, hit start. It's going to do, it says I have a thread break, but anyway, my machine's not on, so I have to turn the machine on. But I always unplug my machine when I turn it off, just because I don't completely trust a surge protector. So I'm going to go back to the start position. I've turned my machine on and plugged it back in. I'm going to hit OK. It's going to do a single stitch, and then I'm going to hit start, and we're going to be off and running. Now, I didn't mention, but I'm using white isocord thread in the trough, and on the back, the bobbin thread is going to be green that I think matches the leaves of the rose tablecloth. This first one I'm doing in white. I want to see how I feel about color on the tablecloths as I proceed forward, so that may change. They're both isocord thread, they're both 40 weight, and so I'm going to go ahead and let this sew out. It will sew out the first section, I'll cut and it'll move to the second one, and I'll just keep doing that until the whole first row is finished. So it's going to stop at the end of each design, so I can pull the bobbin thread up and cut it. It's going to move to the beginning of the next design and take a single stitch again and proceed. So we have the first two components done. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my bobbin thread again and cut, and it's going to move to the next position and take its first single stitch, and it will continue in this manner until we have the full top row finished, and then I can go ahead and reposition the quilt. You can see I've done everything that I can on the top pass. So now I'm going to advance the quilt till we get to the middle section, and then we'll do that middle piece, which is the two outside edges, the filigree, and then the center. I've rolled the quilt up, so my next point is to realign. So I'm going to hit the realign button. The last thing I sewed was this element here. So I'm going to put the machine there. I'm going to select that, continue, move the needle. The needle is moved. And so now it's ready to go on to the next location and take its single stitch. I'm going to pull the thread up, but before I start the machine, I'm going to go ahead and retension my sides, and then we'll start again. That is our first stop. And our next one, you can see just how quick this goes. I don't have to move back each time to where I finish because the IQ knows exactly where it's at. So it will continue to move back to its correct starting position each time. I like to hold those threads and make sure we're not getting any thread nesting on the back, but we'll see how well I did at the end of the video. As you can see, I'm on the last portion. I basted my edges. This time I remembered to go back to manual, and I had to realign. One of the funny things about a curved pattern like this, sometimes it's hard to find a realignment point because you really want something that comes to a point. A curve is a little bit harder to assess exactly where you're at, but there is one little element in the swirl down here at the bottom that I was able to get a point on. So I'm realigned and ready to go. So I've already pulled up my thread. I'm going to hit my start. And for the whole bottom remaining, I have 11 minutes. So I'm going to guesstimate that the whole process was about 30 minutes. We're down to the last exactly 2 minutes. I already have my thread pulled up. This is the very last component. And I guess my tablecloth was not square because some of the design is going off here. But this is my first whole cloth, so I'm not going to cry over that. It doesn't surprise me that the tablecloth isn't that square. And also I used very tight measurements for the alignment or the size of the quilt when I started. But I still think once I get a little binding on there that it will be fine. I'll have to decide if I want red, green, or white binding. The IQ does a beautiful job of back stitching. It goes up the spine twice, so you can't even see that there's a double stitching there. And I'll be interested to hear any comments about the thread color for the top. If some of you would have used a different color, I'd be kind of interested to hear what you say. After I look at it, I'm happy with the white, and I'm happy with the green on the back, and you'll see that when I pull it off. Here, we're going to do our backtracking. We'll come back to our starting point, and it will be finished. Well, that is the completion of my first ever whole cloth quilt. I'm celebrating all of my successes for this particular project. The first was just learning how to download all those different files, because when I first opened it up, I was confused and I couldn't find where the files were at. But with a little help from one of the designers from Elementz, I was able to understand that each of the files have sub-files underneath them. So I imported all of the different files. Even though I didn't need them all today, I might as well bring them over to the IQ while I have opened the file, and I've got it open. Renamed everything, brought it in, brought the whole design in as a complete unit. We did eliminate the jump stitches today, so we split those out and then recombined the whole thing. So that was another success for this particular project. The only thing that I'm not real thrilled with was because my tablecloth was not perfectly square, I have a little bit of the design off of the edge here. I don't think when it's finished that anyone will see that, but I could have realigned it and shifted it over just a little bit, so it wouldn't have been perfectly square the way the other ones were, but I could have gotten all that in. You could always look at that by moving the head of the machine and looking at the screen and making sure your design is falling on the quilt. But sometimes I get preoccupied when I'm filming. I'm focusing on the camera, the volume, the lighting, what I'm going to say, and sometimes things slip by. But I'm not perfect. So one of the things I wanted to see if anyone would comment on is thread color. I used white on this quilt. I could have chosen light pink, any one of the shades of green, any of the shades of red, But I personally didn't want to compete with the rose print or the dogwood. I'm not sure which one it is. Looks like a dogwood shape, but it's the color of roses, so it could be an old-fashioned single rose. So give me your input on thread color, but I did use green on the back. So on the back, I think you'll be able to see a little bit better how the design panned out. One of the other things I'm pretty excited about are the options that this opens up. Clearly a pantograph with its interlocking design has infinite amount of uses, but I think you can also start to see how a whole cloth quilt really could add a unique flavor to a project. And this is something that I'm interested in expanding my vocabulary of quilting tools, and I hope it's something that you're excited about too. So thank you for stopping in today. I know we kind of went over 3 different segments as far as downloading, unzipping, sending the files to the IQ stick so we could design it, and then actually stitching it out. But I thought it was a pretty fun process. I think it looks good. I just have to get a little binding on it and get rid of my blue chalk line, which in the end I didn't need on this project. But in future projects that might be useful if you were placing separate components, just to make sure you had center. I don't know if my quilt or the tablecloth was not square to begin with, but it didn't quite go in the center. And my chalk line now I'm having trouble getting off. So in the future I'll use my water erasable pen, which I like better. But thanks for stopping by today. Let us know if you have any comments. And you know, we always appreciate it when you like or share or subscribe. Lets us know that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing for you. So thanks for stopping by the studio again today, and we'll see you again next time.